Seeking Wisdom Week 24, Rebuilding the Temple, the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. This week we will study the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. These books are set during the time of the 208-year period of the Persian Empire, dating from 539 BC, when Cyrus of Persia took control of the Near East, until 333 BC, when Alexander the Great of Greece took over. These books focus on two periods, the first being when the first of the exiles returned to Judas under the leadership of Sheshbazzar to rebuild the temple under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Jeshua, and the second being the building of the wall of Jerusalem and the religious reform under the leadership of Ezra and Nehemiah. First, let's look at the repatriation and reconstruction of the temple that took place between 538 and 515 BC. It was during the reign of King Cyrus in 539 that exiled Jews were allowed to return to their homeland. But not all Jews were ready to return. Some were comfortable with their lives in exile, and some even thrived. You must remember, when the exiles were given this option, Judah was still a land of poverty and destruction, so only a few people returned. Eventually, upwards of 40,000 people were repatriated. After King Cyrus's death in 530, Cambyses was crowned and had the ability to conquer Egypt. But shortly after he came to power, he was overthrown by Darius I, who reigned from 522 to 485 BC. Under the reign of Darius, the Jewish community in Judah developed quickly, and with the leadership of Zerubbabel, a civilian leader, and Jeshua, a priest, the temple was rebuilt. In a solemn ceremony in 515, the second temple was dedicated. The reconstruction of the temple was the first step to reconstruction and was seen as a foundation of rebuilding the community. Religious reform took place from 445 to 398 BC, starting with the death of King Darius, followed by the reign of Xerxes from 485 to 465, and then by Artaxerxes I from 465 to 425. It was under the rule of Artaxerxes that the Jewish community once again flourished, and during this period that Nehemiah became a high-ranking official in the king's court. In 445, Nehemiah was sent to Judas to lead the Jewish community, and during his first tenure that the construction of the wall around Jerusalem began. In his second term, he carried out many reforms aimed at strengthening the Jewish community that proved to help their community as well as Persia. With Ezra, a descendant of Aaron, by his side, repatriation began with reconciling the Jews and Samaritans, and he compiled manuscripts of the Bible and tradition to form a comprehensible unit, all the while advocating for Jews to not be separated and appeal to people to abide by the principles of Judaism. In terms of theology, the books of Ezra and Nehemiah break down into four very important segments. 1. Ezra, chapters 1 to 6, covers the topic of the restoration of the temple. 2. Ezra, chapters 7 to 10, covers the restoration of the community of worship. 3. Nehemiah, chapters 1 to 7, discusses the restoration of the wall of Jerusalem. And 4. Nehemiah, chapters 8 to 13, concludes the rebuilding with details of reinstating the community according to God's law. When the first repatriates rebuilt the temple, the participation in worship was reestablished, but the community itself was still impure because some of the population had married pagans. So this became one of the jobs of Ezra, the scribe, to restore purity to the community. He was also responsible to spread the word of the law of Moses and be sure the repatriates were kept safe. The job of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and making sure the Israelites were dispersed to spread the good news fell on Nehemiah, the political leader. We must also look at the way the books show the continuity between God's people before and after exile. When we read about the people that helped rebuild the temple, it was the Israelites, proven descendants of Israel, that were recognized and helped rebuild the temple. These Israelites were able to return to their homeland and aided in the rebuilding of the temple on the old foundation, with the wall around the temple being built from a pile of burnt stones. In this new temple, all worship practices, holidays, and rituals remained the same, and what was once thought of as a revised law was also the law of Moses. The restoration of the temple, the community, and the wall are all presented as the work of God, facilitated by chosen human beings. It was Jerusalem that was rebuilding the temple when Haggai and Zachariah, the two prophets, were sent to urge the people to continue and complete the work on the temple. It was the hand of God that protected Ezra, bringing him back to Jerusalem so he could reform the law of Moses, and the benevolent hand of God that protected Nehemiah so he could convince the Persian king to allow him to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. This all-encompassing restoration lasted for hundreds of years and through many hardships, but was finally achieved by the power of God. So why are these books important to us? First of all, these are the only books in sacred scripture that helps us understand the post-exile restoration work of God's people. Secondly, these books summarize the struggles of a community attempting to rebuild itself, both materialistically and mentally, from fragments of the past to become a single new entity that continues traditions of the past with the power of God through strong determination, a concentration of efforts of the entire community, and good leadership. Third, these books portrayed two typical figures of morality and leadership, Ezra and Nehemiah. Both of these men showed absolute confidence in God and sought his help in every situation, but were never surrounded by luminous miracles of God. They used their wisdom and determination to carry out their mission. Ezra and Nehemiah wholeheartedly worked for the people and for God, giving their all to complete the mission of reconstruction. Ezra, who could also be called the priest, was well versed in the law of God and knew how to convince people to reorganize the life of the community according to God's law. He was also considered the new Moses by the Israelite community that laid the foundation for Judaism, which helped this religion to survive to this day. And Nehemiah, who was an exemplary organizer, knew how to use people to his advantage to encourage them to deal with enemies on the inside and out. The 3,000-year history of the Israelites is an unending circle. Collapse, rebuild, flourish, decline, and continuously be conquered by empire after empire. This is a nation that has been burned to the ground twice, surrounded 23 times, attacked 52 times, and passed through the hands of 44 different colonial governments. After the events of 587 BC, they were exiled for nearly 70 years, and in 70 AD, they spent thousands of years wandering the earth, being despised and killed, and yet all these years later, the Wailing Wall still stands as a reminder of the terrible pain the nation endured, even after being turned to dust. Skipping ahead more than 1,000 years, in 1897, Austro-Hungarian reporter Theodor Herzl aroused the Zion movement, which is a word derived from the word Zion, meaning Jerusalem. Zionism is a movement that calls for the revival of the Jewish state, and since its inception, thousands of Jews have returned to Palestine, the land God promised them 3,000 years before. With the death of 5.5 million Jews in World War II, Europe felt the need to compensate the Jews for the loss of people that the Nazis had so brutally killed. Does the hard work of Ezra and Nehemiah sound familiar? In 1948, Israel was trying to reestablish itself in Palestine, and just a day later, a coalition of 5 Muslim countries, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, simultaneously opened fire to attack in order to protect the Muslims' Palestine. This was followed by a 6-day conflict that led to Syria, Egypt, and Jordan being defeated, allowing Israel to control this vast Palestinian region. This conflict led to occupation of their land, looting, and it erased the capital boundary that had been proposed by the United Nations. When this conflict began, Israel was in a state of self-defense. But as it progressed, the Israelites became more and more aggressive, and it alone defeated the Islamic coalition. In 1967, it took Israel only 6 days to not only knock out Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, but it also captured more territory of the three countries on its way to reclaim Jerusalem as the capital. This was a time when Israel had control of a large area of the Palestinian Muslims' land and left tens of thousands of Muslim refugees with nowhere to go, and this area became known as the occupied territory. Finally, the Arab-Muslim coalition bitterly admitted defeat and signed a treaty with Israel in exchange for lost lands. It was on December 6, 2017, U.S. President Donald Trump officially recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel before the opposition of the Muslim world and the United Nations. This highly controversial decision in international politics has started many an argument and is seen as potentially causing a conflict in the Middle East because of the strong opposition of the Islamic Arab. We must admit, however, that President Trump has tackled a no-way-out problem that has been in existence for decades between Israel and Palestine. With each country having their own point of view, Israel declares that Jerusalem is their homeland and want to retrieve what is rightfully theirs, and the Palestinian Muslims declare that the Israelites left the country for 2,000 years and it no longer belongs to them. The United Nations, in an attempt to appease both sides, gave each a section of land, one for the Palestinian Jews to form the State of Israel, and one for the Palestinian Muslims to form a united Arab state. This agreement was intended to make Jerusalem a special international zone controlled by the UN. The decision of President Trump has caused a lot of controversy because it is believed that a biased decision against the Muslim world in Palestine was made. Of course, on the other hand, Trump's decision was rejoiced by Israel and was similar to the celebration of their ancestors returning to the ancestral land of Ezra and Nehemiah when they were rebuilding the temple. In May of 2018, on the 70th anniversary of the founding of Israel, a coin was struck featuring President Trump and the Persian Emperor Cyrus. In the middle of this commemorative coin is a 7-lamp shade symbolizing Israel. On the left is a symbol of ancient Persia, on the right is a symbol of America, and at the bottom is the proclamation of the Persian Emperor Cyrus as recorded in the book of Ezra, chapter 1, verse 2. God has given me the responsibility of rebuilding him a house in Jerusalem. In minting this coin, the Jewish Council expresses their gratitude to President Trump, their modern-day Cyrus, to fulfill 70 years. The phrase struck on the coin is the most distinctive feature because when the people of God were enslaved by the Babylonian Empire in 587, God promised them via Jeremiah that he will repatriate them after 70 years. As we all know, this prophecy was fulfilled through King Cyrus's decree for the repatriation of the temple in 539. Modern-day Israel was established in 1948, and 70 years to the day, President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, helping them return to the holy city of their ancestors. Many people believe the timeline of this event is not a coincidence, but a miraculous providence of God fulfilling the 70-year prophecy of Jeremiah. This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then after 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity, says the Lord, making the land an everlasting waste. This happened to be a prophecy foretold in 538, at the time of the fall of Babylon, making it an everlasting wasteland. We are not here to discuss politics, political affiliation, nor right or wrong. But with our faith, we believe that God keeps God's promises to Abraham and his descendants. As he once used Cyrus, a pagan king, to rebuild the temple, today he can use Donald Trump or literally any other person on the planet to carry out plans he has for his chosen people. Reading Ezra and Nehemiah makes us aware that God is the Lord of history. He is still present and in full control of this world. When we look at any nation's demise or exile, this was God's work, and it is His decision when the exiles are repatriated. Throughout the history of the Jewish people, they were witness to the decline of the Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, Greek, and Roman empires, as well as the destruction of many other people, while they themselves, thanks to their obedience to the law of God and the unceasing flame of faith in themselves, were able to withstand the test of time. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this week's lesson. Please join us next Friday for a new video. The answers to this week's questions will be revealed in next week's video. Remember, every Friday at 7 p.m. the Seeking Wisdom Challenge will be posted on YouTube and Facebook. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, or subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and we wish you a wonderful weekend full of grace and joy.